When it comes to qualifying for the actual disability policy, there are different definitions that each policy has. And again, these are different from employer to employer, from policy to policy. It's really important that you have an understanding of what it takes for you to claim that benefit if you ever do run into one of these disability events during your life. Welcome to Wealth in Progress, the weekly podcast for professionals in their 30s and 40s trying to build wealth while juggling careers, family, rising expenses, and the occasional panic after scrolling social media for 5 minutes. I'm PJ, founder of Wealth and Plan, a virtual financial planning practice serving clients nationwide. If you want to learn more or start a conversation, head over to wealthandplan.com. We are currently accepting new clients and would love to get to know you. Here is this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Wealth in Progress. I am your host, PJ. I'm the founder and financial planner here at Wealth and Plan. And if you watched last week's episode, today we're sort of building off of that. We are in the middle of a 5-part series talking about employer benefits and really just kind of highlighting different options that might be available to you from your employer, making sure that you have an understanding of what's available. And really the sort of the meaning of this series is not for me to tell you what's the right or wrong option. It's simply to educate you and make sure that you have a better understanding of your options and whether or not to sign up for something or not. Last week, if you watched our episode, we talked about 401k basics. So we kind of explained what a 401k is. We talked about the match. We talked about the different contribution options. If you have not seen that video, feel free to check that out. And today we'll cover disability coverage. We'll talk about what disability coverage even is. We'll define it. We'll talk about the short-term policies, long-term policies that might be available to you through your employer, and really how to qualify for those policies. Next week, we're going to talk about group life insurance. So really, it's just a life insurance benefit that's offered to you by your employer while you're working. The following week, we'll talk about AD&D coverage. And then the very last week of this series, week 5, is going to be just a quick overview of some other benefits that might be available to you, such as the health savings account, the flexible savings account, anything else that might be an option for you guys as you sort of sign up for your benefits every single year. So let's jump into disability coverage. We might not take the full 15 minutes this week, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and jump in. So really, the reason why you would sign up for a disability policy is it is intended to replace your income if you no longer can perform your duties. Some examples would be an illness or an injury that prevents you from doing your job and therefore puts your income at risk. When it comes to qualifying for the actual disability policy, there are different definitions that each policy has. And again, these are different from employer to employer, from policy to policy. It's really important that you have an understanding of what it takes for you to claim that benefit if you ever do run into one of these disability events during your life. So the first one is called own occupation. This is probably the most favoring definition for you as the employee. What does true own occupation policy mean? Own occupation means that, let's say you have a disability event, and for the sake of our presentation today, I'll pick on a profession of being a heart surgeon. So let's say that you are a heart surgeon and your profession is performing open heart surgery. And I'm sorry if there are any heart surgeons listening to this. My medical terms aren't the best, but let's use that for our example. So let's say that you perform open heart surgery, and obviously you really need your hands. And let's say something happens to your hands to where you can no longer do that. If you cannot perform open heart surgery, that means you can put in a claim for your disability coverage and replace part of that income through your policy, right? So in other words, you cannot perform your job, your own occupation, therefore you qualify for that specific disability policy. It's the most favorable definition. The second definition is a little bit more broad, and it's called any occupation. So any occupation means that you have a disability event that prevents you from performing any duties out there, not just your own job. Let's go back to our example of being a heart surgeon. Let's say something were to happen to your hands as a heart surgeon, and you can no longer perform open heart surgery, but you can maybe still work in the cardiology office and do imaging of the heart. So you can still do some sort of a job, you just can't do your specific job. If you can still do a different job, then technically you would not qualify for that type of a disability policy, because for you to qualify, you have to meet the any occupation definition, and you can perform a different job within your office or maybe even outside of your industry. So as long as you can perform a different job and you have an any occupation policy, then you would not qualify for any benefits from that policy. So you can already kind of tell, if we compare the own occupation policy to the any occupation, own occupation is definitely the one that you'd want to have, because if you cannot perform open heart surgery, you get paid from your policy. With any occupation, if you cannot perform open heart surgery, but you can do a different job, you don't get paid. Most employers out there, and this might relate to a majority of the listeners out there, they have what's called a modified own occupation definition when it comes to disability policies. So what does that mean? So the own occupation fact still stays true. In other words, let's say that you are an open heart surgeon, something happens to your hands, you can no longer perform open heart surgery, and you want to file a claim for your disability benefits, you can, and you will get paid. However, if you go out there and you do find a new job, so again, in this case, it would be optional in a way, then a modified own occupation policy would stop paying you the benefit as soon as you find that new job, right? So in other words, if you have a disability event, can't perform your job, never get another job into the future, then the disability benefits will pay out to you. But if you go out there and you find some sort of another job, then your disability benefits will be cut off because you'll receive some sort of a different income. In other words, this is a way for the insurance company to prevent you from essentially paying benefits on top of this second income that you might be receiving. It's a way to kind of limit their losses. So those are sort of the three most common definitions. There are a few other definitions out there. Obviously, this is something as if you ever looked into your homeowner's insurance policies or auto insurance policies, it's really important that you understand the way that they define risk and the way that you can claim that benefit. You don't just want to sign up for something and think, okay, cool, I'm covered. But in reality, it's very restrictive. And if you do have a disability event, you're relying on this policy, you can't claim your benefits. That would really be something that you'd like to avoid, ideally. Let's talk about those employer paid policies. So like I said, typically those policies have a modified own occupation definition in terms of how you qualify for those benefits. But let's talk about sort of how you get that benefit. So most employers will pay for some sort of disability benefit on your behalf. That's not to say that all employers will. I've seen scenarios where employer pays for all the benefits for your disability. And what I mean by that is really we're talking about premiums here. We're not talking about the actual benefit. That's the actual benefit payout is on the insurance company. I'm talking about the premium that it takes for you to buy this policy. So like I said, I've seen employers that pay the premiums for disability policies on behalf of their employees. I've seen where they pay a percentage. I've also seen where they say, no, we're not going to cover any disability premiums. It's up to you as the employee to pay for those premiums. And again, it's just important for you to review and understand whether or not you have any coverage, especially if you are a high earner and you're really dependent on that policy. It's really important to understand what you have. Some employers, they'll typically give you an option to buy more coverage. They'll say that the policy will maybe pay a higher percentage of your income if you were to have a disability event, or have a little bit more favorable terms of the disability coverage. So again, really just important to see what your options are. All right, so let's talk about different types of disability policies. The first type is short-term disability. And as the name suggests, short-term disability policies cover short-term disability events. The coverage period typically can be anywhere from a few weeks up to a year is what I've seen. There could be many different events that could qualify you for disability benefits, but some of it could be maybe a surgery, and it takes you a little bit longer of time to recover from that surgery and to get back to the office and to performing your duties. If there's any mothers out there, maybe a complicated pregnancy could extend your recovery time. So the short-term disability policies will typically pay for disability event from anywhere from a few weeks to about a year. Again, depending on the policy. There is this thing out there called a waiting period, and you might be familiar with this from other insurance policies that you might have, but every policy, they'll have a waiting period. Essentially, they will not pay any benefit for the first 2 weeks, up to 30 days, whatever the definition is. After that is when the benefits will kick in, and they'll pay it for as long as the policy says that it will, as long as you continue having that disability event. So again, just to kind of summarize it, to make it simple, short-term disability, it'll pay a benefit for a short period of time. The other one is long-term disability. So really, this is the coverage that you get if you want to protect your income from a disability event for a longer period of time. I've seen these policies pay up to retirement age, again, depending at your age when you claim disability benefits. I was just working with someone else looking at their benefits, and they were in their early 30s, and their long-term disability policy would pay up until their age 65. So again, long-term disability is sort of that catch-all if you would like to protect your income for a longer period of time. Because long-term disability benefits typically last for a longer period of time, they have a longer waiting period. Could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, again, depending on the policy. Very last note, employer benefits typically only provide a percentage of your income. And again, this is employer specific. It could vary. I have seen employers that cover 100% of your disability income, which is great, fantastic. I've seen employers that cover 60% of your income up to a certain limit, right? So it could say, short-term disability policy, you have that, great, we'll cover 60% of your income. So again, depending how much money you earn, if the cap is, $1,000 a week, then that's what they'll pay you every week for as long as the policy lasts, and then you're done. And then if you need disability coverage for longer, then long-term disability policy kicks in, so on and so forth. So just be aware of how much income your policy actually replaces. If you do enter one of these events and are, counting on earning the same amount of income as you currently are, but your employer only covers 60% of your income, be aware of that. Don't let that put you in a financial burden. And there are ways to purchase additional coverage beyond what is offered from your employer. There are a bunch of third-party brokers out there that offer these types of disability policies. Here at Wealth and Plan, we are not brokers. We are not going to sell you any sort of insurance. We're just going to tell you the pros and cons of each and whether or not something makes sense for you and your family. If there is a disability event or if there's a need for disability coverage beyond what is offered by your employer, we are happy to make that connection with one of our brokers if need be. Again, just making sure that you understand all the benefits and you are protected. All right, so just to kind of tie the knot on everything, next week we are going to talk about group life insurance. That is really just the life insurance that's provided to you by your employer while you're still employed with them. So we'll spend some time talking about that next week. And just like last time, quick disclosure, really what I want you guys to know is that this is for educational purposes only. None of this is investment advice. Everyone's situation is a little different. So always talk to a financial professional before you make any decisions. And if you are listening to us or watching us on YouTube, please like, please subscribe. We really do appreciate it. It allows more people to discover us and hopefully learn from these videos here. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please give us a like. Please subscribe on there as well. We really would appreciate it. At the same time, if you just want the highlights, we are on LinkedIn. We are on Instagram. Please give us a follow or a connection if you're on LinkedIn. We really do appreciate that, guys. And hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Hope you're enjoying these last few months of summer. If you're in Texas, if you're elsewhere and your summer's over sooner, I'm really jealous because it is ridiculously hot out here. And every single time that we go outside for longer than 5 minutes, we are sweating instantly. So we're not having fun. But all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.